MMAOB Daily podcast. I'm your host, as always, Adam Martin. I'll be taking you guys through the latest in the world of mixed martial arts. You guys can follow me on Twitter at MMAOB. And this podcast, as always, is available at MMAOddsbreaker.com. Go to our YouTube channel. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about it. Also, check me out at bjpenn.com and MMAranks.net. Happy Friday, guys. Made it to the end of the week. So congratulations on that. Looking forward to a good weekend. We got some great fights coming up tonight. Bellator 227. Tomorrow, Bellator 228. And, of course, UFC Copenhagen. So some really good fights coming up this weekend. I'm excited for it. Personally, I'll be going to the Tom York concert tonight in Toronto. So that's going to be awesome. I'm a huge Radiohead fan. So it's going to be nice to see that concert. But, of course, I will tape or I don't know if I'll be able to tape the Bellator card, but I'll find a way to watch it. And tomorrow, of course, I'll be watching UFC and Bellator as well. So looking forward to those cards. And it'll be a good weekend. But let's talk about some news here and then some fight announcements. All right, first thing I want to talk about, the UFC announced yesterday has released BJ Penn from a contract. So that is really big news, obviously. Dana White confirmed to Kevin A. who they've released BJ. So a couple of thoughts here. First off, I still work for BJPenn.com. I love working for BJPenn.com. They treat us so well there. I gotta tell you guys, that is one of the best websites I've ever worked for. They just treat us so well. And when I met BJ in Rio, he was awesome. So personally, as far as I'm concerned, BJ is to me, he's been great. So I can't say anything bad about him. I know that obviously he's got some personal issues going on. We all know that. We've seen the videos. Everyone sees the videos. But I still want to talk about him being released. It sucks for BJ, obviously. He wanted that Nick Lentz fight really bad. He wants to fight again. He wants to prove he can still win. And the guy's a competitor. Obviously he hasn't gone his way for a long time now. I was actually at his last win. It was against Matt Hughes in Detroit back in 2010. That was the first UFC card I ever went to. And I was at that card, and he knocked out Matt Hughes in 21 seconds. He had the draw against John Fitch, and then since then, he's really struggled, obviously, 7 straight losses. But being fair to BJ here, look who he's lost to. Nick Diaz, Rory McDonald, Frankie Edgar, Yair Rodriguez, Dennis Seaver. Okay, you probably should have won that fight. Ryan Hall, and Clay Guida. So these are tough fights. Like, it's not like he's been fighting the worst guys in the lightweight division or the featherweight division or the welterweight division. He's fought in 3 different weight classes against really tough guys. So you got to give BJ credit for that at least. Having said that, 7 straight losses. It's surprising he was on the roster this long. But the guy's obviously a legend. Dana White has a lot of respect for him. But I think after that latest incident, they just realized that it was the right time to let him go. And for me, I don't think he's done, though. I don't know anything. It's not like I have some inside information here, guys, but I feel like BJ's going to sign with Bellator. I just think it makes so much sense. Rich Chow is a really good friend of BJ Penn, a fellow Hawaiian, I should say, and they're doing a card in Hawaii in December. I think they have a couple coming up next year as well. They do a card in Hawaii every year. The UFC, for whatever reason, has refused to go to Hawaii. They keep making excuses up why they can't go. Bellator goes once a year, if not twice a year. So BJ Penn headlining a Hawaiian card or even co-headlining, that makes a lot of sense. I also saw some people saying, why not have him fight Takanori Gomi for a second time in Ryzen, like a Pride rematch? That'd be kind of cool, So I think there's some options for him. Actually, he fought Gomi in K1 Rumble on the Rock. Rumble on the Rock was a good promotion too. I'm pretty sure Rich Chow was the matchmaker for that promotion. So again, he's the matchmaker for Bellator. He's a good friend of BJ Penn. Connect the dots. There's no doubt in my mind he's going to sign with Bellator. And I feel like they can give him matchups that he can win. He's 40 years old, obviously, and he has retired a few times. And a lot of people say he should be retired right now. But BJ, like I said, is a competitor. The guy wants to win. He likes fighting, as we know. And I still feel like he can win some fights. So we'll see what happens here. I mean, again, the last couple of opponents he's had are not easy guys to fight. Clay Guida is a really good fighter. He's got good cardio. He's a wrestler. He's tough to fight. Ryan Hall is a submission artist. Again, if you look at the list of guys he fought in the last 7 losses, who is he really supposed to beat? I guess Dennis Seaver. That's really the only guy that he probably should have beaten. The other guys, Yair, Frankie, Rory, Nick Diaz, like these are tough fights, like very tough fights. Most people lose to those guys. So his 7-fight losing streak is not good, obviously, and it's affected his record. He's only 16-14-2, but the guy's still one of the best of all time. I think the UFC, they made their decision here, and you could definitely understand why they released him. It is a little surprising because he's been on the roster forever. He's fought in the UFC on and off since 2001. Obviously, he had that contract issue all those years ago when he went to K1, but for the most part, he's been a UFC mainstay for nearly 20 years. So this is kind of crazy, but at the same time, it's a different era. And I think with all the bad publicity lately, the the UFC made their decision to let him go. So we'll see what happens with BJ next, but I feel like Bellator is the next move for him. And I don't know who he's going to fight, but they like bringing legends, and there's lots of guys who can fight. You can fight a fellow legend, or you can fight someone's like kind of like a journeyman gatekeeper type. There's a lot of fights for him there. I mean, if Frank Mir, Roy Nelson, these guys are also on losing streak, can keep getting fights, there's no reason why BJ can't and win fights as well in Bellator. So that's the move that makes sense to me, and we'll see what happens. All right, a couple other things to talk about here. Chris Weidman, he spoke yesterday or recently to Submission Radio, and he talked about Jon Jones. He says he's going to beat Jon Jones. He has the blueprint, and a lot of people are laughing about this. I saw the reaction from the fans. Listen, I get it. Chris Weidman has really struggled lately. The guy's lost 4 of his last 5 fights. Just not the same guy he once was when he beat Anderson Silva, when he beat Lyoto, when he beat Vitor Belfort. That guy was one of the best fighters of all time. That Chris Weidman from like 2011 to 2015. That was one of the best fighters of all time. But he's really struggled lately. He does have that submission win over Kelvin Gastelum, though, from 2 years ago. People forget about that. They just look at the knockout losses, the one to Jacare, Mousasi, Romero, Rocco. Again, look at those guys. Those guys are studs, too. Maybe the Rocco fight, that was a bad loss for him. He got beat up pretty bad there. But the other fights, I mean, Romero, like, is he supposed to beat Romero? I don't think so. Mousasi, I don't think so. And Souza, I think he might have been the favorites in those fights, but I picked the other guys in all those fights. So I think Chris Weidman's a great fighter, but I think he's been given tough matchups. The move to light heavyweight, I think, is great for him at this point in his career. Why not? He's 35 now. He's a little bit older than you'd expect, right? Because he had kind of a late start to MMA, but I think the move to 205 is great. And Dominic Reyes is a very, very difficult opponent in his debut, no doubt about it. Dominic Reyes is a beast, 29 years old, a lot younger, 11-0, 5-0 in the UFC. Having said that, Volkan Oezdemir nearly beat him, and Chris Weidman, I think, could come up with a game plan to beat Dominic Reyes. Will he beat Jon Jones? Probably not. Probably not. But it is kind of an interesting fight, right? Jon Jones, he's so good everywhere, but Chris Weidman is pretty good too. He's a good wrestler. He's got pretty good striking, good submissions. It's an interesting fight. He's a former champion. He's got a big name. So Jon Jones needs fights. He needs opponents. Chris Weidman, I think he's moving up to 205 at the right time. So goes out there, beats Dominic Reyes next month at UFC Boston. That's huge for him. If he beats Dominic Reyes, there's no doubt in my mind he'll get the next title shot. No doubt. Because as much as I'd like to see, Jacare or Souza, Jacare Souza or Jan Blachowicz, the winner of that fight for the title, I think Chris Weidman's a bigger name than those guys. And I think he would get the title shot first. So, again, we'll see what happens. I said that a few times in this podcast, but we'll see what happens. You never know what the future holds. And he has to get by Dominic Reyes. But if he does, Chris Weidman for Jon Jones, it's a very realistic fight, in my opinion. One note here for the Bellator U28 card tomorrow. I watched the stare downs, and it actually came out with Lyoto Machida and Gegard Mousasi last. I asked James, he's there in LA right now, if that was shifted to the main event. He wasn't 100% sure, but he thinks it is too. So I'm pretty sure it is. It has been shifted to the main event tomorrow. It's still a 3-round fight, which I would love to see Bellator do 5-round fights for their main events. There's no reason really why they can't. I think Coker said it's something to do with the television, the time on Paramount. That makes sense, I guess. But still, like, the UFC's been doing the 5-round fights for non-title main events for, I think, 7 or 8 years now. So, to me, there's no reason why the Bellator can't do it as well. And I think a fight like Machida versus Mousasi, too, that kind of deserves to be 5 rounds. So, who knows if they'll change that in the future. But for now, it is 3 rounds. And I think the reason this has been moved to the main event is because they want to get the featherweight fights out of the way, including the title fight between Pitbull and Archuleta, which really is the best fight in the card. But they want to get them out of the way because after the fight, they plan on bringing the fighters and the coaches into the octagon, into the Bellator cage to pull the numbers out for the matchups for the next round of the tournament. So I think this actually makes sense, and I'm surprised they didn't say this sooner. But yes, it looks like Machida and Mousasi will be the main event, and it's not a huge deal. It's just it would be nice if that was 5 rounds. That's just a point I wanted to make. All right, let's get to some fight announcements. There's some pretty good fights coming up. Light heavyweight bout between Mauricio, Shogun, and Sam Alvey. That'll take place at UFC Sao Paulo. A little surprised by this matchup. Sam Alvey's really struggled, where Shogun actually has looked pretty good lately. So a little kind of weird matchmaking here. I personally would have Shogun versus like Glover Teixeira because I think Glover wanted Shogun or even a prospect maybe, but instead he's going to get Sam Alvey, which, again, I don't know if I love this matchup. I'd rather see Alvey used as a gatekeeper personally. Look at his record right now. He's 0-3, just 2-3 since moving up to light heavyweight. He's still a good fighter, 33-13-1 no contest record in his career. So Sam Alvey's a really good fighter, tough. But I think at 205, he's lost his durability, but he's been knocked out a few times. Just really hasn't looked like the same guy we saw early in his career where he knocked out a bunch of guys in his early days in the UFC. He can still be competitive. The fight with Clifton Abreu was somewhat competitive, but we saw what happened when he fought Little Nog. We saw what happened when he fought Jim Crute. And I feel like Shogun can kind of get the better of him too. Shogun actually has looked really good lately. Shogun's only 37, surprisingly. Like, he's been around forever. He's been fighting since 2002. So fighting a long time, somehow only 37. But 26-11 record. He's won 4 of his last 5. So he's looked pretty good lately. He has the knockout win over Tyson Pedro in his last fight. A big upset, huge upset. Lost to Anthony Smith, but before that, he'd beaten John Vellante, Corey Anderson, and Little Nog. So he has some decent wins in his last couple fights. Obviously not the same guy he once was at the height of his career when he was a champion, but I still think he beats Sam Alvey. I think it's kind of a bad matchup for Sam Alvey. And man, if he loses 4 straight fights, you think the UFC might consider cutting him. But at the same time, Sam Alvey is known for putting on good fights, and he's kind of a company man. He's always there fighting for the company and anywhere they put him, and flies all over the world to fight. And this is another example of that. The guy's fought everywhere. So Sam Alvey, Shogun, I do like Shogun in that fight. UFC Singapore, injury replacement fight. Brandon Markos stepping in on short notice to fight Ashley Yoder. So Ashley Yoder looked decent lately. She kind of had a rough start to her career in the UFC. She lost her first 3 fights, but since then won 2 straight over Cedric Kondo and Amanda Cooper. So that's good. Now she takes on Randy Markos, who's filling in for how do you pronounce her name? Yan Jindon. So that's a decent injury replacement. Randy Markos is a ranked fighter, so good injury replacement here. 9-7-1 record. Really struggled, I think, in the UFC for the most part, though. Look at her record. It's win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. She has a draw in there, but struggled, especially when she stepped up in competition. Does have the win over Carlos Esparza, so that was a good win, but coming off a bad loss to Claudia Gadelha, and bad in that she just really didn't do anything in that fight. It's a fight that she could have won, in my opinion. Claudia Gadelha has not looked like the same fighter at all. So this should be an interesting fight between Yoder and Markos, but I do favor Markos still, even with the inconsistency. I do think she's a better fighter, but we'll see what happens in that one. UFC South Korea gets a couple fights here. Marc-André Barriault will be taking on Park Jun-Yong. Park Jun-Yong. Marc-André Barriault, he's, again, other guy struggling in the UFC. He's 11-3 in his career, but 0-2 in the UFC. He lost to Andrew Sanchez and Christoph Jocko. The Jocko fight was pretty close, but he has lost both of his UFC fights, so that's not good. He takes on Jung Park. That's how Tapology calls him. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He lost to Anthony Hernandez in his debut. It was a pretty close fight until the submission, so that was a bad loss. But I think this guy probably does beat Barriault. Barriault has not looked that good, and he's going to go to South Korea to fight him, so that's not good. And the other fight is Mike Rodriguez versus Da Jung, also on that same card. Let's see here. Yep, Mike Rodriguez, another guy who's kind of struggled in the UFC, 10-4 record in his career, but in the UFC, just 1-2. He beat Adam Milstead by knockout, but he lost decisions to Devin Clark and John Allen. In the John Allen fight, that was bad because John Allen, I think, took it on like really short notice, and he was like a plus 400 underdog, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a bad loss. He should have won that fight. And then he takes on Da Jung here, 12-2 record. Da Jung coming off a really good win in his UFC debut against Kadis Igverminov, and he submitted him with a standing guillotine. That was a great win for him. He's on a nice win streak here. I'm pretty sure this guy's going to win. So give me Da Jung. He is from South Korea as well, so that should give him a boost. And I think that's it for the fight announcements, guys. Going to trouble check if I missed any news, but we have a good weekend of fights coming up, so I'm excited for that. It should be really good. I think that's all I want to talk about. So, yeah, thanks again, guys, for joining me today for the podcast. I apologize for my voice. I haven't been feeling well this whole week, so hopefully I'll be back to health, 100% health by Monday. Should be okay. Great cards this weekend, guys. Bellator 227, Bellator 228, UFC Copenhagen should be fun. Guys, follow me on Twitter at MMAOB. This podcast is available at MMAOddsbreaker.com. Go to our YouTube channel, like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends about it. I appreciate that, guys. And check me out at bjpenn.com and MMARings.net. And I have an article over at MMARings.net about Jorge Masvidal and how he's turned from a journeyman into a superstar in 1 year and the amazing turnaround he's had. So check that article out. Once again, guys, appreciate you tuning in. Have a great weekend. I will be back Monday breaking down all the fight news from the weekend. Have a good one, guys. See ya.